We're spending close to 5 hours on our phones, and it's getting closer to passing the amount of time that we're sleeping. So the time we love to waste is not wasted time. Hey, welcome back to a Rest, Eat, Move podcast. Hope you enjoyed the last podcast. If you haven't, it was a replay of a presentation I did on eating for better mental health. This is Matt Johnson today, back with my father, Chris, in the studio. And as we continue this October mental health awareness type of month, and our conversation is around mental health and stress and the nervous system, this podcast is going to be titled, Can You Be With Yourself? And I think we're both passionate about talking about this as we work with clients that maybe come to see us about nutrition or exercise. The observation many times is that the nervous system is out of balance. And we see that when we try to create stillness or ask about the amount of stillness. And people continue to say, well, I'm not comfortable doing this. I'm not comfortable laying still. I can't breathe. And so we thought it's an important topic. I think we have some cool stats to share. And we're not trying to solve anything today. I think we're just trying to think differently. And that's what we want you to do today is maybe think a little differently. Maybe ask yourself, are you spending enough time with yourself? Are you focusing, and are you able to be with your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions? Do you avoid your fears? Do you hate uncertainty? These are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So welcome. Can you be with yourself? You're pretty good at being with yourself.
I think your mother would say, yeah, he's pretty content
He's
by
pretty
himself.
good with himself.
He doesn't need a whole lot except for food and some sleep and a little movement. No, I'm pretty content with myself. So, but yeah, I think this is a great topic because we've done training in the past where we bring groups in and we lay them down to do some breathing exercises, or way back in the day with Dr. Phil Nuremberger, we're working on some sleep. And I remember we were sitting in the room one day with Dr. Phil, and he goes, watch what's going to happen here. And I'm like, what's going to happen? He said, in about 3 or 4 minutes, some of these people are going to start twitch. They're going to start twitching because they couldn't calm their mind and relax their body. So it's really an issue. I think it's more than ever before, and this is one of the reasons why we're talking about it today.
Yeah, I always think and I've said this before, I think about Forrest Gump, and, what's the movie about? Probably everything. But one of the things that always stood out to me is he's content with being Forrest Gump. He's confident in himself. He likes being with himself. Can sit on that bench and talk all day. And I use that, and I ask, people sometimes, like, if you had to sit on a bench, would you be uncomfortable? Just sitting on a bench. And I think many people are uncomfortable. And when we go through some of these stats right now, I don't think it's really a surprise. It's been a train going downhill a long time. I would say we're going to talk about social media today. I think that's a big component of it. So before we get into some of that, I think about the nervous system. We've talked about it. I don't think we can talk about it enough, but you got two ends of the autonomic nervous system that we've discussed. You got the gas pedal, which is the sympathetic, and you have the brake, which is the parasympathetic. But if you break those down, let's just say they're two sides of a coin, heads, tails, yin and yang. And so if the gas is always on, that can lead for many people to this feeling of anxiety or fatigue. And in that case, the answer is, the strategy is, we gotta pull it back. We gotta be calmer. We gotta quit running around. We have to start focusing on being introspective, inward. But the other side is, if the brake is always on, the parasympathetic, in most cases people need more of that, but in the case of depression, that's where depression lies. Withdraw, I don't feel like doing anything, I'm not motivated. In that case, we kind of have to get off our butt and get moving. So I want us to start with that today. Is when we talk about mental health, we're not trying to diagnose severe mental health issues, but we are trying to really help people with some of these more subtle uncomfortableness mental health cases, whether it's a low-grade anxiety or a low-grade depression, or being nervous, or not being able to focus or sleep or calm the mind down. So, and if you want to call that mindfulness, you can call it mindfulness as well. But I thought that was a great place to start today because I think that's the root cause of why we can't be with ourselves.
Well, again, we've talked about the nervous system a lot, but I think sometimes people really need to be reminded what it is. And you do have this autonomic nervous system, with the sympathetic nervous system being the gas and the parasympathetic.
What would you tell what would you tell Ez at 6 years old what the nervous system is?
Well, the big thing I would tell Ez is that to help him, because he's probably, the gas is going all day long for Ez, right? So I watched him play football last Saturday, and he's going to probably be a good football player, but he likes to move and he likes to be active, and his mind's going 900 miles an hour. But how do we get him to calm down? So that's where breathing can come in.
But what is the nervous system?
The nervous system basically is how your body, it's like the wiring. And so the wiring is
electricity.
It's the energy of running through the body. So his energy is really, and you've said this many times, but the sympathetic nervous system, or when you look at anxiety many times, it's the fear of we're worried about the future, and then depression's the past. How do we get back into the present? And that's hard to do. So it's really interesting to watch my grandson play football, because probably the most I've ever seen him in the present is when he's playing football. He's really engaged. He knows he needs to get the flag. When he gets the ball, he's running for, but he's fully engaged. He's not looking at the sidelines. When we watched him play baseball last summer, all the kids are not engaged because, again, it's not interesting to them. So I think that's the problem we see with adults many times, is it's hard for people to stay in the moment. And people talk about this all day long, but how do you do that? And when we're in the moment, that's when time disappears. We've all done that in things in our lives, and that's some of the things we crave the most, is like, wow, the time just flew by. Well, it's because you're in the moment.
Time and space isn't really.
Yeah, so that's the hard part right now, is how do you get people to be more, intentional about quieting the mind and getting back to staying in the moment.
Yeah, because I think, one, our attention's being hacked. It's being absolutely hacked. And so in Ez's case, I think, or everybody's case, the great example is he can actually focus very fiercely when he's got his attention grabbed.
Yeah, when we're cruising down, when we're up north and we're going down the road, and I'm talking about the tractor house and going to the tractor store, he's looking at the big rigs. He's all engaged.
Yeah.
Fully engaged. And like you said, he's super smart, super sharp, but then all of a sudden here comes the squirrel, and the squirrel's over there, and
that's just what our society is. It's our attention is being hacked. I think that we're, our brain's fragmented, it's all over the place. And I think we don't focus on what's in front of us. I think we're constantly focused on what's not in front of us. And that creates this
what's interesting,
lack of skill to be with ourselves.
Right. And so I was presenting last week in Minneapolis, and I'm in the back of the room, and you've done this 100 times, and I'm watching the presenter in front of me, and there's not a break. And so I'm looking at how many phones are underneath the table. And I would say 50% of the room has the phone underneath the table. So my goal was to try to grab their attention. And I came out, I did it a little differently, but I told a story right from the beginning. And as soon as I told that story, and again, we did the movement stuff and got them up going, and the music's blaring and all that. But I kind of came out and I thought, I'm going to tell a story. And it just kind of hit me. And I told the story, and I'm like, you could see the attention just completely, people are full engaged, because you need to grab that attention right away. And unfortunately, that's,
So, but yeah, we're fragmented.
We're fragmented. So I thought to myself, and then I had them the whole time.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge we face today, especially when we're, as a professional speaker, you have to get up there and you're like, okay, how do I grab their attention?
After an 8-hour meeting.
They're tired. They're and I was the last speaker of the day, and there's nothing between me and the, and the fun.
Well,
so,
that reminds me, I was, we've done 650 webinars, and I think you're optimistic that people are paying attention on the other end of the camera, but the difference is you don't have the body language, you don't have the cues, But I put myself in the other side of that equation, and I have many times. But I signed up for this webinar on a topic that really could benefit the business, and my intention was high. I was ready to engage, and you get going there virtually, and so you're watching something on your computer or your phone, and I mean, there's so many temptations, and there's not any of those other cues. So after 5 minutes of this lady introducing herself and telling about where she comes from, and I was bored. I'm like, I have better things to do with my time. And so it was the temptations, it was the environment, it was the way that the information was being presented. And so it just made me realize that there is a fragmenting happening in the culture, that there's some pros of it. There's some pros that I can sit and get any amount of information that I'd ever need at my fingertips. But if you don't know how to practice the skill of being present when you need to be, and I think back to school, no one really taught me through K through 12 how to sit still and pay attention to geology or geometry. I could care less. Mm-hmm. But if you told me about Michael Jordan and his stats, I mean, I could rattle these things off in 2 seconds. I'd watch a full game and watch it over and over again.
And I think that's the challenge we face with information today, is you have to make it engaging and fun.
And I think there's a lot of people doing that. I think that's
too.
why YouTube and social media is so engaging. It's very...
But it's short. It's quick. It's in and out.
And it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
And, Dr. Phil shared with me this graph so if you think of the spectrum of focus, and I find this extremely fascinating. On one end is interest. How interested are you in something? You're going to focus on it. If you like red wine and someone's talking about, you're fully engaged. If you're not interested in red wine, you're not going to pay attention. The other side of the spectrum is fear. And I think that's really interesting. The problem is people think, well, that fear is a good thing. No, that creates this tunnel focus. You're not aware of other things. And so this interest focus, you're much broader. You're able to kind of pay attention to other cues. And in between is what people are so fearful of, is boredom. And honestly, I think when we'll get to this in a second, but I don't think boredom's a bad thing, but I see people avoiding boredom more than ever before. And so what's the challenge with being with yourself? Well, it's probably because you're trying to avoid boredom.
Well, I wrote this in there. I wrote it in my book, but the time we love to waste is not wasted time. And you can't say that enough of people, like, oh, I got to be busy, got to be productive, I got to do this, I got to work harder. No, I was just training one of the guys here, and he went to a spa, and one of the things he said, that the workouts weren't very demanding. But I said, how did you like it? And he goes, I really enjoyed the workouts. So instead of being a hard charging, crush me in the gym, the workouts were a little bit lighter, but it was not there to go stimulate my sympathetic nervous system. It was to help rein me back a little bit, create more rejuvenation by movement. And sometimes I don't think we think about that with movement. We talk about restorative movement, of how powerful that can be for the mind, versus just let's go harder than the treadmill and lift heavier weights or whatever. So I think that's the big thing people have to understand. If you're like a type A personality, your sympathetic nervous system's all on day long, we don't need you to have a harder workout. We probably need to have more of a relaxing workout.
And to create that balance that nobody likes to talk about.
Right. So, if I'm not looking at my, heart rate variability, and I'm not looking at how I'm getting crushed on my wearable, then I feel like I've wasted my time. And reality is, no, it's a great way for you. And we always talk about this. One of the greatest benefits of moving your body is what it does for your mind and how it can relax or wash the brain. And I think sometimes if you're listening to this right now or watching this, you think about your own workouts. Do I have a few of those plugged into my life where I do have some relaxing type movements that are not crushing me, and you actually look forward to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to anything where you're trying to, I'm trying to self-improve. I think that's becoming a little bit overused, but when you're thinking about self-improvement, you probably need to do a little bit of what you don't want to do. So if you're attracted to going and playing hard and working out hard and results, and you probably need a little bit of the other. And if you are not competitive and you're not interested in pushing yourself and you're okay with just kind of being calm and chill, you probably need a little bit of that, competition and pushing yourself, because both ways lead to, I would say, complacency or some outcomes that are not good. I think one of them's fatigue.
Sure.
So if you're hard charging, at some point fatigue's going to kick in, right? Or burnout. And you're seeing it. And then real issues. Now we have to make a change. Well, let's try to change before we get there. But the other side is with this withdrawing, and you hear about this quiet quitting, and you hear about this lack of engagement at work or lack of passion in life. And again, this is what we're talking about today. Let me share with you a couple stats, because I think technology is an amazing gift, and I think technology will continue to enhance our lives. But when we talk about technology sabotaging our attention and focus, it's not the device like the phone. So the phone isn't the problem. The vehicle is the phone, but what's on the phone is really what's becoming the real issue with our attention. And it's not all negative, but 33 minutes on average we spend on Facebook, 52 minutes on average on TikTok, 30 minutes on average on Instagram, 29 minutes on average on YouTube. The average person spends 2 hours, 27 minutes on social media a day. Not all of that's bad, but 15 years ago, that number is closer to zero. And when you think about what are we doing there, well, and there's documentaries, and I'm sure everyone's aware of this, but we're creating this dopamine dependence. And we're getting the dopamine from something that's actually not real. You might have conversations with real people, you might have a community and connection, but it's not really how we were designed and built. And so these platforms know the neural circuitry kind of like a slot machine.
Oh, for sure.
So it's a slot machine. And so when you think about dopamine and the ability to not be with ourselves, it's a lack of, we're not hitting that trigger fast enough, that dopamine trigger. And it creates this dopamine deficit state. And what does that mean? How do you know if you're in a dopamine deficit state? There's many things, but one of the cues is, let's just say you're scrolling the internet or scrolling social media and it doesn't feel that good. Like you're not getting a feedback where you feel, oh man, I feel amazing. And it's not creating any action. There's nothing that's happening, but you keep scrolling. And that's kind of what I feel from people is like, if they're not busy, if they're not productive, if they're not being distracted in some form or fashion, then they're like, well, I'm bored. And that's, I just find that very fascinating and I think a big problem. And so I was looking at my phone. I got 56 text messages yesterday. My kids use my phone as the disclaimer, but my phone was picked up 120 times. So that means I unlocked or unlocked or locked my phone 120 times. I think I average 2 hours and 29 minutes this week, closer to 3 hours on a typical week. And on average, humans right now are spending about 5 hours on their phones a day.
Yeah, think about that number for a minute, that 5 hours a day. I remember you said to me a couple weeks ago, and I asked this question to the audience the other day, how many of you like to get 8 hours of sleep? And I remember you saying, gosh, everybody was going crazy. Like, of course I'd love to get 8 hours of sleep. But think about that. Why can't they get 8 hours of sleep?
Something else is taking the time.
So you just said 5 hours of.
So we're close to passing screen time to sleep time.
That's unbelievable.
So we're
at what,
six and a half hours of sleep, and we're close to 5 hours of screen time.
I guess I didn't know it was that high.
So
where's my phone at? I have no idea.
Yeah, you were blessed to grow up where you like to say this in your late 20s. 20s is when you develop some really strong habits. Mm-hmm. And so if you were dependent on your phone in your 20s, like the culture is now, or many people are now, those are going to be habits that were going to be tough to break.
It was interesting. We were playing golf the other day with some really close friends of mine, and the guy that I'm playing with is on his phone the whole time. My phone, I don't even know where it's at. It might be in the car or whatever. I don't know where it's at. So he says to me, you need to start playing a little better. And I said, well, it'd be nice if I had a partner. He goes, well, I'm playing great. I'm like, but you're playing great. we're a team
Team.
today. So you don't even know what I do on the hole. You're just
Did you hit yet?
Yeah, you don't even know if I've hit yet. You don't know if I birdied it. You don't know if I double bogeyed it. So hit him like, well, I need to do this. I'm like, well, no, you don't. If you want to get into this, so it's kind of that awareness. I think it really begins with a little bit of self-awareness that, am I really on my phone that much? Am I really that disengaged? And many times the answer is yes. And that's where it begins, in my opinion.
Yeah, self-awareness. You gotta want this. This is can you be with yourself? I think that, again, we're not trying to fix anything today, but think about that. If I put you in a situation, could be in nature, could be with some amazing environmental things, can you be there? Can you be with your thoughts? Can you be with your feelings? Can you be with your emotions? It could be playing around a golf. In between shots, you may think is boring. Well, it's all your perspective on the
And
situation.
you've heard me tell this story years ago, but we went to the Grand Canyon, did the rim to rim, and I remember going up the North Rim, which is extremely steep if you've never been to the Grand Canyon rim to rim, but the North Rim's just fantastically beautiful, super steep. But I'm really nervous because the elevation and the cliffs and everything else is real. And I see about 5 or 6 people riding donkeys up the North Rim. And I stop and I started looking, and they were like over here, and I'm looking at them. I'm like, who in their right mind would be on a donkey riding up the North Rim? Because if the donkey falls, you're dead. And I ran into the park rangers the next day, and I said, hey, I got to ask you a question. Riding donkeys up, he goes, the donkeys are the most chill pill animal in the world. They're very sure-footed. They don't get spooked. Horses have no chance. And I'm like, I never knew that about a donkey. And then I wrote in my book about the sloth. The sloth, you can't speed up a sloth. In fact, the way the sloth survives is being slow. And I'm thinking, what can we learn from the donkey? What can we learn from the sloth? But I never knew that about the donkey, that it's so sure-footed. It doesn't get spooked. It's very relaxed. What is in the DNA of a donkey? What's in the DNA of a sloth? And how can we take that, that thinking that, how do we slow down? I mean,
yeah,
how do we do that?
I think we're in a result culture. I think we're in a hustle culture. I think we're just more in a survival than a thriving situation right now. I'd like to, coin this when I talk about this, is to do more, you actually have to do less. And I follow this guy on social media. That he's got a great podcast, and his thing is everybody's kind of I got to do this side hustle. I got to do this work. I'm going to try to get all, but his point is if you just focus on the one thing, it's actually going to exponentially be better than the 3 things. And I think we have this FOMO, this fear of missing out in all aspects of our life, because we've created this hyper awareness of everything going on in the world, whether it's things we see or we're just more exposed. And so what's in front of us really is what's real. And for most of us, we're not paying attention to it at all. And then when we have to pay attention to it, we don't like what we hear or feel, or the emotions that it creates.
One of the things I've done over the years, and I've tried to do this almost every session, but when I take a person and we're doing individually training, and they come in and we'll talk and pleasantries, what's going on in your life and all that stuff, but I try to slowly get them to let their mind disappear for an hour. So I get them to focus on what we're doing. We're having fun. We're doing whatever. But it's all about that. And many times they'll come out and they're like, this is exactly what I needed today. It wasn't anything fancy. It wasn't anything special. But it just took their mind from being so 9,000 different thoughts, whatever, just to focus on that one thing. And it does. It truly washes the mind, the brain. And I think that's what people sometimes miss when they're in the gym. They're so focused on what do I got to do over here and what do I got to do over there. You're missing the whole purpose of moving your body. And I think that's when we talk about movement, I think that's the greatest thing for mental health, is how it can get you back to doing one thing.
Well, and so for me, I like to listen to music when I work out. I find it to be motivating in a sense of it kind of gets me in a mood. I mean, lately I've been listening to Neil Young. Neil Young is not for everybody in the gym. Sometimes I listen to house music, which is not for everybody. Again, so my spectrum's very vast. But if you haven't just gone and exercised lately with no music, listening to how you're breathing, focusing on your thoughts, your phone's not with you, it can be a very amazing experience, but it also can be not what you're looking for. You have to be self kind of motivated and paying attention to different things. And so if I ask somebody, is it windy outside, and they don't know, well, they're not paying attention. You should be able to know that because you probably were outside. Or are did you listen to the leaves, crashing into each other? So these are the things that I think we've gotten so away from. We love to look at fancy pictures on the internet or cool videos, but this stuff's around us at any moment.
Your mother and I were up in the UP celebrating our anniversary.
Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
And we saw these waterfalls, Sable Falls, Minor Falls, Tequaman Falls, whatever. But in some of the busier ones, there's more people, but the other ones, there was nobody. And so we just closed our eyes and you just listened. You could hear the water coming down and then going down. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible if you just stop for a minute. I remember my mother, way back in the day, she used to take us outside and we lay down in the grass and look up in the clouds. And how many times, when was the last time you laid on your back in the grass and looked up at the clouds? And what you're looking for is just takes you back. It calms the mind, relaxes the body. But nature's incredible.
But that's such a wasted time.
Such a wasted time. But here I am talking about it, 55 years later, when I was probably 10 years old. So,
yeah, again, another example, and exercise can be really powerful for mental health. And we do it for many releases, and there's different forms and fashions, but I think this is more common than not common. But I saw this 18-year-old kid, a guy, and he was like 2 feet from a mirror with his phone taking a selfie. He was not aware of anything around him. Obviously, this was important to show to his followers or community that he was in the gym, and I think there can be some positivity in that, but it just made me think, what if he was just with himself? He's thinking about how to take a photo versus how can I really calm my mind or stimulate my nervous system or really get into this movement. And, we both played sports, and so when you think about sports, the people that perform are not the ones that are the fastest, strongest. That's a trait, but it's the ones that can focus their attention in the moment.
Yeah, and that's, as you know, that's
be in that flow.
Right, and be in the flow. How do you get in the flow?
So I don't think it's possible to be in a flow if you're fragmenting it with, I got to take a picture, I got to send a text, I got to be into this state. So as we kind of wrap up this conversation of can you be with yourself, what are some of your thoughts on what people can do to, number one, they got to create self-awareness. Are you in the space that you really could be?
Right.
I don't believe most people are because they're not given the time to do it.
Right.
I think it's comfortable to distract ourselves. Think about COVID. We came in unprepared psychologically and physically to be with ourselves. Coming out of COVID, I think we just survived, and I don't think we really changed anything, and everything sped up. So what can people first do to create that awareness of where they're at?
Well, I think you said that's number one. Are you really, just if you asked yourself, if you sat for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, could you do that?
Are you comfortable?
Are you comfortable doing that once in a while? You and I both do this. We teach people to breathe for a minute or two. They have a hard time doing that. I'm not talking 10 minutes. I'm talking about 1 to 2 minutes. So, and that's a skill. So I think breathing is a really good first step. If you can breathe through your nose, use your diaphragm, slow it down, you do that for 1 minute, and all you're thinking about is the breath moving in and out. That's it. And what it's going to do, it's going to help calm that mind relax the body, all that kind of stuff. So breathing is a huge thing. Also, I think people are not putting enough space in their life. They're overscheduled, and when you're overscheduled, it's hard to create this stillness. And stillness
What about
is a
when people
skill.
say they don't have enough time?
Well, you just said it, 5 hours on the phone. So it's not about time. It never is about time. It's about intentionality. And so it's really hard. Like you've heard this from the stage. You've done it from the stage. But I'll say, hey, imagine if you took a 12-hour electronic break once in a while. And they all look at you like, what planet are you from? There's no way I'm going to do a 12-hour. Okay, when you're awake, start with an hour electronic break. But they're just shocked that
Charge your phone in your kitchen instead of your bedroom. Like just try little things
all
to make
steps.
it easier.
So, where is your phone at night? How often do you touch your phone? Where is it? I mean, Pat Gillespie was talking today about the sleep sack for the phone. When you come into a meeting, put the phone in your sleep sack, and you're going to be
sleeping bag for the
sleeping bag for the phone. So to me, it really becomes with intentional. My breath is a big deal for me.
I think one of the things on the phone is 15 years ago, and for the large part of being around, we didn't have a phone. So we can survive without a phone. We actually, I think, can thrive without a phone.
And
but it can be a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool. Like you said, it's not the phone, but it's the tool. And we're all into habits of using the phone for everything. The list goes on. But you're exactly right. We didn't have a phone way back in the day. In fact, I grew up where the phone was attached to the wall. So that was it. And your mom used to yell at us. So we, drag the cord. But we didn't have a phone. So again, we're not there. We're not going back to that. But it really is awareness, like, where am I spending my time, and are you feeling like you have enough rejuvenation? And I love that word rejuvenation, because I know myself, sometimes I just need to have quiet. I don't need to drive home with music on, or sometimes I'll put spa music on, but I don't want to listen to anything. I don't want to listen to talk radio. I want to listen to a podcast. I want to listen to anything. I just need to be still. And I think that's a skill that more and more people are really craving, but they don't know how to do it. And that's where it begins. But stillness is a skill, and it's
a practice.
It's a practice.
It's difficult.
It's difficult. You need to carve out space in your day.
But it's probably the root pillar for happiness, better sleep, better relationships, better thoughts, creativity.
Well, too, again, in our business, sometimes, and again, we're coming back more into travel now, but I remember Dr. Phil said to me one time, he had a quiet retreat for 10 days. And I was talking to him, he does it in Montana. So imagine no talking for 10 days. And so I was talking about that, and he says, I said, I'm thinking about that. He goes, I don't know if you're ready for that. It was like a challenge. And he said, why don't you start out with a 24-hour silent day? And I thought to myself, so how do I do that? And he goes, well, you fly a lot. So when somebody asks you a question, you can respond. But besides that, you're not really engaging. And it was easy to do. And it was amazing. I was seeing stuff in the airport that I would walk by every so often, and I never noticed that, because I was always like, so I think that's a great step for many people, is just take a handful of hours and be intentional about not talking, only listening, watching.
But your time is so valuable. Why are you going to do nothing?
Because it's the way to help me be better.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. I think when you say, okay, what's the problem with not being able to be with yourself? Then everything else is going to be harder. And, that's why we wanted to talk about this. There's so many aspects to mental health. There's so many aspects to the nervous system, the food we eat, the way we move, the way that we talk to ourselves. These things all intertwine. It's not just in isolation. And so the last podcast I talked about eating for better mental health. It's not going to cure mental health, but it's going to help with some signaling, some communication.
Well, when we started pivoting to doing, virtual, when the pandemic first arrived, I remember you talking a lot about mental health and immune system, whatever, but we kept coming back to the answer's always in you. It's in your body. Get back into your body, whether it's eating, whether it's breathing, sleeping, spacing. But when you get back to the body, that's the magic. I mean, you think about all the mental health medications today. And again, our role is not that, but how do they work? How do they work? Well, if you can understand the benefit of serotonin, the opposite of serotonin is dopamine. So if dopamine's always on, your serotonin is probably going to be hurting. And serotonin is what they're trying to, uptake in the brain. So you can see you have this opposing things. Well, the first step is to calm the mind, relax the body. And if we can start doing that and get some daily movement and start eating a little bit better and get some sunlight, now mental health starts getting better and better.
So when you're thinking about can you be with yourself, and as we wrap up, I think, thinking about Forrest Gump, if you like movies, I just find that to be, he's very content with being Forrest Gump. He's okay with his emotions. He's okay with his fears. He's okay with his, challenges, his lack of abilities. And that's, I think, something that we're drastically missing in our culture when we're constantly thinking about, I could do better, this person's in a better spot, or, oh my gosh, they look better, fitter, I got to keep up. So it's a constant battle.
Let me share one last thing here. So way back in the day, Dr. Phil Nirenberger and I and Matthew Cross were doing this training. And Dr. Phil had this exercise, and it was a 3 minutes listening exercise. And I remember it like yesterday. And Dr. Phil gave me the grumpiest guy in the room because everybody else had a partner. And you had to tell a story, but you couldn't respond for 3 minutes. Now, these were all financial advisors. They're really good at talking. And a whole bunch of them, you told a story, and then you had to kind of recite the story. And most of them couldn't do it. Not the first time they did it. So it really hit them along the way that they didn't really know how to listen because they always had the chatter in their mind. And his whole premise was, if you want to be a better financial advisor, better parent, better spouse, better whatever, you have to have the skill to learn how to listen. And a big part of that is learning how to calm the mind. So he had a practice, and then he had the science behind it, and it was like gold. I'm like, wow, this is so engaging because he's saying, hey, how to become a better financial advisor, how to become a better, significant other, spouse, parent, whatever it is. But first you have to understand how the nervous system works, and then you need to train it. And that was the 3-minute listening exercise. So sorry I interrupted.
I listened for 3 minutes. So as we wrap up, I think the quote you said is what I want to leave the listeners with, is the time we love to waste is not wasted time. We're in a society that's fearful of boredom. I see it in my kids. I see it in myself. I see it in my clients, that it feels unproductive if we're just in idle. But I think we got to get back closer to this point, as we're spending close to 5 hours on our phones, and it's getting closer to passing the amount of time that we're sleeping. So the time we love to waste is not wasted time. And as we continue this kind of series around mental health, we'll be back next week with another topic on mental health. But if you need anything, have any questions, any comments, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us at info@ontargetliving.com. Have a great day, and we'll see you again next time.